The interrogation room on vessel Karath Sen smelled of copper and old fear. That was intentional. The Velkan had designed the chamber over 3 centuries of refinement. The precise ratio of recycled air to chemical suppressants, the exact temperature at which most carbon-based species began to shiver, the acoustic dampening that swallowed every sound a prisoner made, so that each scream existed only for its maker. It was, by every measurable metric, a perfect instrument of psychological dominance. Interrogator Sela Voss had broken 47 sentient species in this room. She had extracted confessions from species that communicated through color, from ones that felt no pain, from hive minds that could theoretically distribute their suffering across 1,000 bodies. She had made a Vreth warlord weep. She had cracked a Solen priest who had taken a vow of mental silence. She had never, not once, in 11 years of service, encountered a subject who looked times bored. The human sat across the metal table with his wrists in restraints. He had already tested twice and apparently found acceptable. His name, according to the capture manifest, was Sergeant Dae Jong-yoon, Coalition Ground Forces, Designation 7, Echo. He was medium-sized by human standards, which made him slightly larger than the Velkan average. He had a scar that cut through his left eyebrow and disappeared into his hairline. He had said nothing since being brought in 40 minutes ago. He was, as of approximately 3 minutes ago, humming quietly to himself. Sela Voss set her data slate on the table between them and studied him. She had reviewed his species biology before entering. Humans were death-worlders, a fact. The intelligence files listed in dry, clinical language that failed entirely to capture its implications. High-gravity origin, endurance, predators. Capable of sustained physical and psychological stress that would kill most species within hours. Prone to something called time's hope, which apparently persisted well past any rational basis for it. She had noted all of this. She had adjusted her approach accordingly. And still, watching him hum to himself, she felt something she hadn't felt in this room in years. A flicker of unease. "You may call me Sela," she said. Her translator rendered it in clean, accent-neutral Galactic standard. "I want you to know that I don't enjoy this process. My goal is information, not suffering." The human looked up at her. His eyes were dark brown, and they held the particular quality she'd noticed in the pre-session recordings, a steadiness that read, "In any species," as someone who had already done their calculations and arrived at a conclusion they were comfortable with. "Uh-huh," he said. Sela Voss folded her hands. "You are Sergeant Dae Jong-yoon. You are attached to the 3rd Expeditionary, currently operating in the Kethara Band. You were captured during the strike on the corridor relay. I would like to know the Coalition's timetable for the next operation in this sector." Silence. The ventilation hummed. Somewhere beyond the acoustic baffling, the ship moved through space at velocities that made the mind go blank if you thought about them too long. The human said nothing. "I want to explain your situation to you," Sela Voss said, leaning forward slightly. "You are alone. You are in Velkan space, aboard a command vessel, in a room that has been specifically engineered to maximize psychological discomfort. I have not yet employed any of the tools available to me." She let that word times, tools, times, sit in the air between them. "You have no reason to believe rescue is coming. Your own species' psychological research confirms that hope degrades under sustained isolation." The human tilted his head. "Why aren't you afraid?" she asked. It came out more genuinely than she intended. It was not a tactic. It was a real question. The silence that followed was not the silence of someone searching for an answer. It was the silence of someone deciding how much of the answer to give. Then Dae Jong-yoon looked at her with those steady brown eyes, and he smiled. It was a small smile, quiet, the kind of smile Sela Voss had seen on the faces of people who had already accepted something she had not yet been told. "You want the honest answer?" he said. "Yes, because," he said, "I've been in worse rooms than this." She felt the unease deepen. "I find that difficult to believe." "I know you do." He glanced around at the walls, the gray, seamless, perfectly calibrated walls, with the mild interest of a man appraising a modest hotel room. This is a good room. Whoever built it knew what they were doing. The temperature's a little low. The air's got something in it that makes the chest feel tight, subtle, professional. He looked back at her. I've spent 11 days in a collapsed tunnel in the Mekong Valley, with 3 broken ribs and 1 working light source. I've done 4 days without water in a Karath desert environment. Once, I was in a POW simulation exercise that my own side ran 60 hours, and those people times, didn't hold back. He paused. This chair is uncomfortable, but I've had worse chairs. Selavos did not move. Her training told her to reframe, to find the angle, to locate the gap between what a subject said and what they needed. She found no gap. Those experiences don't make you immune to suffering, she said carefully. No, he agreed pleasantly, they don't. Then I fail to understand. Because fear is a resource, Daejung said, and something shifted in his voice. Not harder, not louder, just time settled, the way a heavy stone settles when it finds the bottom. You spend it on the things that are actually dangerous. You spend it when it'll do something. He met her eyes. I've used up a lot of fear in my life. I've been afraid in the right moments, and it kept me alive. Right now, in this room, with you, fear won't do anything useful. So, I'm not spending it. Selavos was quiet for a long moment. In 11 years, she had heard many things in this room. She had heard pleas, threats, bargains, breakdowns, confessions spoken through tears, and confessions shouted in anger. She had heard the specific, distinctive silence of someone who had simply given up. She had never heard someone times explain their emotional state as a tactical decision. You believe, she said slowly, that you have control over whether you feel fear. Not always, he said, but right now, yeah, pretty much. And if I were to demonstrate that your situation is genuinely dire, I already know my situation is genuinely dire. There was no bravado in it, no performance. You're an interrogator on a Velcon command ship. I'm a sergeant with information you want. I understand the variables. But here's the thing. He leaned forward, just slightly, against the restraints. You need something from me. That means I still have something. The moment I'm scared is the moment I forget that, and I am not going to forget that. The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. Selavos became aware that she was the one who was not moving, not breathing quite correctly, not entirely comfortable in her chair. She became aware that the room, her instrument, her domain, had somehow rearranged itself without anything physically changing. She became aware that the human had not raised his voice once. She thought of the 47 species she had broken in this room. She thought of the Vreth warlord's tears. She thought of the Solene priest. Then, she thought of the intelligence files she'd skimmed before entering the ones in dry, clinical language about endurance, predators, and high-gravity biology, and something called times hope, times that persisted past any rational basis. She thought the files had significantly undersold it. She stood. She gathered her data slate. She paused at the door. I'll return, she said. It was all she could manage. I'll be here, Daejung said behind her, and she could hear in his voice that he had already gone back to being calm, had already settled back into that extraordinary, incomprehensible stillness. The door sealed behind her. In the corridor, Selavos stood and breathed the slightly warmer air of the ship beyond the chamber, and thought about what it must be like to be a species that treated fear as a times budget times a resource to be conserved, allocated, spent only where it generated returns. She thought about what it meant that the human in that chair had looked at every variable in his situation and decided, calmly and consciously, that she wasn't worth the expenditure. Her blood, which ran a pale silver blue and cooled rapidly in stress, had not been this temperature since her first day in this corridor 11 years ago. She called for a senior officer. She needed new instructions. She was not, she realized, entirely sure she was prepared for this particular war.